So I truly believe that the secret to Newmont getting back over $50 a share is for Newmont to adopt a Bitcoin treasury strategy. Now, you may say to yourself, that makes no sense. But there's a lot that doesn't make sense about Newmont. Here's a company that's trading at about 11 times 2025 consensus earnings per share estimates. Okay, so a PE, a forward PE of about 11. I think the S&P 500, of which, by the way, Newmont is a member, I think the S&P has a multiple of 27 right now? So that doesn't really make sense. Agreed? Here's something else that doesn't really make sense. You have Bitcoin mining companies, something that I know a little bit about, some of whom are trading at, well, I would love to say that they're trading at very high multiples. In some cases, they have no earnings, so there's no multiple to really be derived. But, their stock prices have been leaping ahead quite aggressively, to say the least. So that doesn't necessarily make sense when we kind of know that Newmont, despite having a bit of a reputation, which I don't know that I really agree with, right? But Newmont does have this reputation as being, for whatever reason, a poorly run company. I don't know that that's an accurate description of a company that delivered in Q3 2024 what I believe were record results. I mean, in the company's 100 or so year history, I think Q3 2024 may have very well been some of the best results it's ever had. Driven, yes, by the spot price of gold having gone up. And despite the fact that all-in sustaining costs were a bit higher than I think many would have liked to have seen, the company, I think, pointed out, hey, there were a couple of little issues that came up. Q4 2024, we're expecting our all-in sustaining costs to go back to a level that we'd previously talked about. So my point being, hey, look, is this really that poorly run of a company when you're literally producing results that have never been, seen in the company's history? So that doesn't make sense either. Something else that really doesn't make sense is that Newmont's stock price has essentially collapsed. I mean, it was trading at about, 57, maybe 58 or so, give or take a little bit, 4 weeks ago. Now, I think it's 42? So there's nobody, in the Newmont shareholder base who feels good about this. I can't imagine anybody feels good about this. Unless you're just hey, I like the fact that the stock's cheaper. I'm going to take the opportunity to buy some more of it. I get that. But let's keep it super real. There are some other gold mining companies like Agnico Eagle who have a reputation for just delivering really good results as determined by the market, and you can see it reflected in the stock price. If you look at a chart of Newmont, you look at a chart of Agnico Eagle, there's a difference there. So why would adopting a Bitcoin treasury strategy have the potential to really move Newmont's stock price? So you got to bear in mind that for a long time, there's been a divide. There's been people that are proponents of Bitcoin, of which I include myself as one. And then you've had people that have been just pure proponents of gold, of which, in some ways, I've been one as well. And you've had this real divide that has existed. And it's, in some ways, only gotten worse. And it kind of gets to a point where it's hey, my ego's tied up into this. I am a gold bug, until the day I die. Or conversely, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist who, sees gold as being worth nothing. I think both extremes are kind of ridiculous at some level. Bitcoin, far from being bullshit that's worthless, is actually quite the phenomena. And I don't know that any reasonable person would argue that it's going to go away anytime soon. By the same token, gold has been around for thousands of years and is something that likewise is not going to go away anytime soon. So why can't you have a company like Newmont, the leading gold mining operation on planet Earth, a member of the S&P 500, a company that's seen as something of a bellwether in the gold mining industry. Why can't Newmont make an argument to its shareholders, right? That, we want to be the first company in the gold mining sector amongst the major producers to at least be open-minded to a Bitcoin treasury strategy. By the way, I'm not suggesting for a moment necessarily, right, that Newmont get involved with Bitcoin mining. I mean, yeah, it sounds synergistic in the sense that, hey, Newmont's used to running gold mines. That's a really tough thing to do. They'd probably have a lot of skill and experience as it relates to the tough job often required to operate, Bitcoin mining operations. And hey, then you're mining not just gold, but you're mining Bitcoin. I get it. It kind of sounds interesting, right? But, I think just going into the open market and buying Bitcoin is probably a less risky strategy. It kind of puts all those Bitcoin mining operations to work for you in the sense that, hey, they're supporting the network. This is kind of like the MicroStrategy playbook, right? MicroStrategy, I think, very shrewdly stayed away from Bitcoin mining and instead simply worked to acquire more Bitcoin. And if you look at a chart of MicroStrategy, it might as well be called microstratosphere because their stock price has simply exploded into the stratosphere. I'd really like for there to be a serious conversation about this topic because I think those of us who maybe look at the world strictly through the prism of the benefits of gold, and we look at Bitcoin and we see that as like it's fool's gold and, it can't be a store of value because there's no value to store. Hey, you like, Bitcoin, well, there's, 20 plus thousand other cryptos, right? If you look at it purely from that negative angle and you shut yourself off, right, to the possibility that, this thing is here to stay, I think you do so at your detriment. Now, here's the biggest catalyst of all. And this is why I think if Newmont were to adopt it could be a modest Bitcoin treasury strategy. I mean, I think there's something to be said for not necessarily saying, hey, you know what, we just literally, and this is true, Newmont sold one of their tier 2 mines for $780 million in cash. I think that was announced today. I mean, I think it could be a bit much to say, hey, we're going to take the proceeds of this sale and purchase Bitcoin. I mean, right, that would be a very dramatic statement to say the least. But why not at least, hey, have an exploratory committee, right, within the board of directors, say, hey, we're going to really look into this, communicate that to the market, gauge some market reaction. Because see, here's the thing, and this is what I really want Newmont shareholders to think about very seriously. There is a very real possibility that the United States federal government will buy Bitcoin to create some kind of strategic Bitcoin reserve. If that were to happen, regardless of your personal views, right, regarding Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin is going to go up. And at that point, Bitcoin becomes as real as anything can be, right? Because for better or worse, you now have, I don't really have the words to describe how monumental that has the potential to be. I lack the language to describe how monumental that would be. But the risk to Newmont in particular, I see as being somewhat minimal. Okay, the upside I think is phenomenal. Say out of the roughly, let's call it 750 some odd million, right, generated from the sale of that mine, the tier 2 mine, that was announced today. What if only, say, 200 to 300 million were invested in Bitcoin? Okay. Suddenly you have a transformational transaction which takes the world's leading gold producer And that leading world gold producer is now creating a bridge between the world of gold and the world of Bitcoin. You could even argue that Newmont is now engaging in a process whereby a portion of the gold that is extracted from the earth, that's turned into fiat currency, a portion of that is then turned into Bitcoin. That, I think, is very intriguing. I think it's very intriguing because Bitcoin is not likely to go anywhere anytime soon. And if the US federal government, and this is a very real possibility, it really seems like this could potentially happen. I've been skeptical, I confess to that, but one has to be open-minded to an evolving situation. And I think there's a pretty good chance that it might happen. So, okay, what's the downside? Well, let's say Newmont invests $300 million in Bitcoin. Okay. Let's say the US federal government doesn't do anything. Okay. The stock price is at $42 or so a share as of the date of this broadcast. Okay. Is the stock going to drop to, $35 a share, $25 a share? Is the allocation of $300 million towards Bitcoin, is that going to push the stock down to $10 a share? I don't think so, right? Newmont supersized its share buyback program. I think it moved it up to like $2 billion is being allocated just to buy back Newmont stock, which I think is a wonderful thing. So what if you take $300 million and you make a commitment to buy Bitcoin with it and to adopt a Bitcoin treasury strategy? What really is the downside risk? Sure, look, I get it. You may be listening to this and you're like, bro, there's no way I want Newmont touching Bitcoin. I get it. I do. But, what's your plan for the stock price to go from 42 back over $50 a share? You might say, hey man, we got to drive our all-in sustaining costs to produce gold lower. Okay, I hear you. Does Newmont have a reputation of doing that? Are they an Agnico Eagle, like waiting to happen? I don't know. I really don't. I do see, however, that companies more and more are adopting a Bitcoin treasury strategy. And the result of being a first mover, I think in the major gold mining space, a company like Newmont stepping up and saying, you know what? This debate between gold and Bitcoin, it's not a debate. We're a practical company. We're a highly transactional company. We're not a company that's built on some sort of philosophical belief that gold is, the ultimate thing. Our charge, right? Our duty, our fiduciary duty, one might even argue, is to maximize shareholder, gains, right? And to make as much money for our shareholders as possible. And yeah, those people who hate Bitcoin, they're like, bro, like if Newmont buys Bitcoin, that is the ultimate disservice to shareholders. They're buying bullshit. Bitcoin is worth nothing. It's going to go to zero. The only thing moving in the direction of zero right now is Newmont stock. And it's weird because I really thought Q3 results were pretty damn decent. Arguably extremely decent considering I don't know that they've ever had results like this in their 100-year history. So I think Newmont shareholders that are extremely, extremely passionate about gold and only gold, right, and that Bitcoin is bullshit, I think we need to be, right, somewhat practical. I think we need to be somewhat transactional. I think we have to understand, hey man, the world changes and we want to change along with it. I hate this concept that gold is the past and that Bitcoin is the future. I completely disagree with that type of black or white way of looking at it. I think both Bitcoin and gold have a very promising future. And I believe that if Newmont can be the first publicly traded major gold mining company to bridge that divide, I think it's going to do wonders for Newmont's stock price. I really do. Okay, so that's some food for thought. I'd love to hear what you think. Again, I'm proposing this in good faith. I understand that Bitcoin maximalists and gold maximalists, right, there's not a whole lot of overlap there. I get that. But I'm hopeful that some common ground could be found for the sake of Newmont shareholders to help push the stock price higher, especially if you are starting to get that gut feeling that, you know what, I think the U.S. federal government is going to start buying Bitcoin and establish that Bitcoin reserve, and that's just going to be a game changer for the price of Bitcoin. Hey, I think Newmont wants to be in Bitcoin before that happens. Okay, just some food for thought.